Thank you for coming to the interview today for the case manager position. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How about yourself?
Good, I'm good. So my name is Janet Abou. I'm the Human Resources Manager here at Service Coordination for People with Developmental Disabilities, and I'll be doing the interview with you today. Did you have any trouble finding the office?
No, I didn't actually.
Great. So I'm just going to start by explaining the process of the interview. It'll be approximately 20 minutes long. We'll start off with a few questions about yourself and your past experiences. Then we'll be doing a few situational questions as well as behavioral questions that analyze your past behaviors in different situations. Then we'll be finishing the interview with a few closing questions. Throughout the interview, I'll be taking some notes, so don't be distracted by me. Just keep going with your thoughts. And at any time, you may ask for the question to be repeated, or we can skip the question and go back to it at the end of the interview. Please help yourself with a cup of water.
Thank you.
Good. So, do you have any questions before we begin?
Nope, I'm ready.
Great. So tell me a little about yourself. You can talk about your past employments, your responsibilities. You can also talk about your interests and your hobbies.
For the last 5 years, I worked as an aquatics director at Calypso Water Park. I was in charge of over 300 staff members, ranging from first responders, security guards, lifeguards and attendants, technical staff, maintenance, etc. And I was in charge of, designing emergency protocols, crisis management, and being a risk manager for the site itself. My interests are, programming. I enjoy going biking and swimming, and enjoy going to the gym.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, we're going to move on to the more situational questions. These questions are a series of job-related questions that focus on how you would behave in a given situation. Okay? So the first question, how would you build relationships with different departments across an organization or with different community agencies?
So whenever you'd be working with different departments, you always want to have positive feedback. You always want to make sure that you go out of your way to help them, or go out of your way to make sure that the job is done properly. You also make sure that everyone works as a team, so everyone has a task or responsibility or a specific job requirement for that project or mission, if you may. But you always want to work as a team so no one gets left out.
Good. That's very good. Okay, for the second question, how would you provide instruction or guidance to someone in a supportive manner?
You want to make sure that you're not commanding with them. You want to make sure it's not as a command. You want to make sure that it's somewhat passive, but you want to make sure that they understand the instruction itself. So you're going to go step by step and give them positive feedback. Just like you're building a house, you don't want to tell them, okay, go ahead, build it. You want to make sure that they lay the foundation, they put up the walls, and if they're at any point, you want to make sure that they feel comfortable in asking you questions on how to do it.
Good. Okay, and the last question for the situational questions. How would you facilitate the transition planning for a 14 to 18-year-old?
Could you go into more detail with that question, please?
Yeah, so one of the responsibilities for a case manager is to help clients that are the age of 14 to 18-year-olds transition to the adulthood within their life. So how would you help that transition?
So it's all about the client, really. You want to make sure that it's, set up an appointment with the client and make sure that you have a step-by-step guide on what they want to achieve. So you want to make sure that it's goal-oriented. And you also want to have parents, or I guess a person responsible for the client involved, so they know that what kind of goals they want, and to guide them in the right track.
Good. Okay, so that's it for the situational questions. We're going to move on to the behavioral-based questions. So these questions are a series of job-related questions that focus more on your past behaviors in job-related situations.
Okay.
So for these questions, I would like for you to give me a brief overview of that situation. Then you're going to tell me about the actions and the responsibilities that you were involved in. And then finally, the results and the outcomes that came out of this situation. So for the first question, can you tell me about a time when you had to take several steps to convince an individual or a group?
Well, at the beginning of the park itself, when it was first founded, we had a lot of issues with the surrounding emergency services. So OPP, Prescott Russell paramedics, as well as local volunteer fire departments. It was only one day where we had a huge incident where they finally decide to collaborate and to cooperate and to, you know, have an emergency protocol and say, when something like this happens again, you want to make sure that paramedics are involved and they know their role, and firefighters know their role, and, you know, the police officers know their role.
So what actions did you take to make sure everybody knew their roles?
I had to sit down with deputy chief of each emergency services, so OPP, Prescott Russell paramedics, as well as the local fire department. And from there, we set up an emergency protocol and crisis management protocol in case an incident like that happened again. And not just for huge incidents, we also did for minor incidents where we have to call, you know, a single police officer to come to work, or have one truck for paramedics or one truck for firefighters, so they know that exactly where to come in and where to leave and who to talk to once they're on site.
Good. So the next behavioral-based question. Describe a situation in which you had to come up with a creative or unique solution to our problem.
There was one incident at the park where there was a group of people on a tube going down the slide, and unfortunately got stuck halfway through the slide, and we had to call the local fire department to come in and bring a ladder. However, we had a technical team up there with their harness and stuff, fixing one of the slides adjacent to it, and we asked them to, you know, if we can borrow their harness, and they said yeah, and they brought it up to that slide itself, and the rope was long enough to go all the way down the slide, so the technical staff member used it and rappelled down and kind of give it a big push and made sure that everyone was safe, make sure that, you know, they stay inside the tube because they're still going on the slide. And yeah, it was resolved pretty quickly. Firefighters came on site, but they just did some R&R afterwards to make sure that they're you know, they're okay, they're nothing, no one's injured, and treat for shock kind of stuff like that.
Good. Okay, the last behavioral-based question. Tell me about a professional relationship you have established and a situation where you use that relationship to deal with a work-related task or problem.
Going back to the first behavioral question that you asked me, after those similar incidents, we had to sit down with individual captains of said departments. So I sat down with, you know, captain of the volunteer fire department, and I sat down with the few units, the Prescott Russell paramedic units that respond to our calls, as well as the few OPP officers in the area. I sat down, you know, each department by themselves, and sat down, we collaborated, and we came up with plans on how to deal with incidents together, and like I said in the first question, made sure that everyone knows what their task is, and when an incident comes in, we made sure that everyone had a job and responsibility, so no one is, you know, walking over each other's shoes. Also with the with the paramedics, actually, I'm just gonna grab that. Actually, with the paramedics, what we did is I bought specific stretcher, specific equipment, identical to theirs. So identical stretcher, identical trauma kit, intubation kit, and everything else. That way, if they come on site, instead of having to, you know, take out their bags, you know, take their time with the patient, they just take the patient and we just swap equipment.
Good. And what kind of results or outcomes came out of the situation? Did you feel that you enhanced the network connections with these departments, with the paramedics? Yeah,
definitely. Faster response times, which is a very serious thing for those branches of emergency services, especially for the patients. It gave them a faster time leaving our site to the hospital if need be, because of the change in protocol.
Okay, so that's it for the behavioral-based questions. I do have a few technical questions to ask you. So first, what technical abilities do you possess that you feel relevant to this job, and how do you feel these demonstrate to the relevance?
Well, like I said, I have 5 years as a director, so I have management experience, I have crisis management experience, risk management experience. I'm well versed in different types of management roles.
Yeah.
And I feel like with all this background, I feel like I'm ahead of the other candidates that would be applying for this position due to my background.
Very good. I do have one more question. What may I notice from your behavior that shows me you are stressed?
Well, usually when I'm stressed, I kind of tune out everyone else and I stick to the task at hand. So if, let's say, someone's trying to give me a tip on how to do it better, or, you know, how to change it, I would kind of just zone out and do my task without listening to anyone. So if that ever happens, that's usually a sign that I'm stressed out.
Okay. Okay, so this concludes the formal part of our interview. Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, can you just go into more detail about the responsibilities of a case manager?
Yeah, so I'm just going to start off by explaining in depth more about the organization. So Service Coordination is a nonprofit bilingual organization, and it's funded by the Ontario Ministry of Community and Social Services and by the Ministry of Children and Youth Services. So what Service Coordination does, it's really the central point of access for persons with developmental disabilities in the Ottawa region. It's our responsibility to carry out intake where necessary for the clients, offer case managers and case management to the children and adults with developmental disabilities. We also administer different programs like respite. So for a case manager, their responsibility is to initiate that intake function and to be assigned to different clients to develop according to their needs and assess them. There will also need to be participating with that client, have them involved with the plannings to create a person-centered plan for services to assist the client in the transition planning from the 14 to 18-year-olds to the adulthood, as well as increasing and accessing services that were available in the community. I hope that answers your question. Do you have any other questions?
No, I don't. They answered it. Thank you.
Okay, good. So for this position, we'll be actually having lots of interviews throughout the week, and hopefully I'll be making a hiring decision, and I'll be notifying the most qualified candidate by the end of the next week. So if you do have any other questions, feel free to call me or send me an email. Here's my business card.
Thank you.
And that's it for today. Thank you for coming. It was a pleasure meeting you.
It's a pleasure meeting you as well.